Hello, everyone. Today we will be talking about all of the C.S. Lewis books that I've read and my advice for which order that you should read them in, or if you should read them at all. As with all good tier lists, we will be starting in the D tier, and the D tier is going to stand for Don't Read. These are books that I would recommend that you just skip over completely. Now, the first one is going to be Pilgrims Regress. The Pilgrim's Regress is very similar in a lot of ways to the Pilgrim's Progress, but where I found that the Pilgrim's Regress fell short was that it wasn't timeless in the same way that the Pilgrim's Progress was. Pilgrim's Progress, I feel like you could read that now or in 100 years, and you will be able to relate to it if you are a Christian walking the Christian walk. The Pilgrim's Regress, however, is quite the opposite. It seems like it is in a time capsule. You go back to like the 40s when he was writing it, and all of the big ideas that were being debated seem to come up in this book, and a lot of those ideas have been completely forgotten and really don't mean anything to us today. So that is why the Pilgrim's Regress is going to be in the don't read tier. It seems like it would have been a great book if I read it when he wrote it, but nowadays it's not quite as good. Next on the list is going to be The Reflection on the Psalms. This is a book that my wife read and really did not like. She really didn't like how C.S. Lewis thinks that the imprecatory psalms are not something that we should be able to pray today. She disagrees with this very strongly, and I would as well. I think that the imprecatory psalms are there for a reason, and they are there for us to learn from. But C.S. Lewis's opinion is that David was just being overly emotional and really shouldn't be talking that way about unbelievers. But this, I think, is incorrect. And my wife would say the same thing. Now, moving on to the C tier, we are going to have Paralandra. Paralandra is the second book of the Space Trilogy, and this is one of the books that I would recommend just skipping over unless you are very interested in C.S. Lewis's works and you are reading through the Space Trilogy. Maybe you can give it a go. But honestly, I thought this was the most lackluster of the three books. Basically, the story goes that a man gets transported to a planet that seems to have just been created. It's like a new Adam and a new Eve, a new planet, and he is combating the snake, or Satan, who's trying to tempt Eve in the story. And it's definitely interesting, but it wasn't as catchy. It didn't grab my attention as well as the other books in the Space Trilogy did. Definitely worth reading, but I would put this way down on the list for one of the latter books to read rather than the former. So, next on the C tier, we are going to have The Great Divorce. This is going to be a controversial pick for the C tier, but it just was not a book that I could get interested in. I tried reading it a few times, and every time I just kind of fizzled out about halfway through. The Great Divorce essentially is about hell, or purgatory-ish kind of book. It's basically what C.S. Lewis thinks hell is like. I think the main reason why I didn't love the book is because I actually disagree with what C.S. Lewis thinks about hell. What he's going to argue in the book is that people send themselves to hell, and I generally would disagree slightly with this. I think that God sends people to hell, but people also send themselves to hell. So it's a little bit of both. I feel like what he's trying to do with his idea of hell is get God off the hook with being like a judge. And I don't think that that is correct. I think theologically, God is a judge, and he is responsible for not only creating hell, but also for sending people to hell. So if you want to learn more about this book, watch my summary on it. But generally speaking, it's a good book. I think the story is kind of interesting, but at the same time, if you have a lot of theological bias against it, you're not going to love it. Next tier we are going to have is the B tier, and these are books that I would definitely recommend reading. First, we are going to have Out of the Silent Planet. This was the first book of the Space Trilogy, and I thought it was very interesting. I thought the world building was a lot better than in Paralandra. The characters are very believable. They feel very real. No one is like overpowered or anything like that. I just really liked it. I thought it was a good fiction book. I'm not generally a fan of fiction books, but this one grabbed my attention. It follows the story of Ransom being transported out of the Silent Planet, right, out of Earth, and he goes to Mars, and there's a bunch of aliens there, and it's definitely a very interesting book. So highly recommend that one out of the Space Trilogy. Definitely better than Paralandra. But not better than that Hideous Strength, which we will talk about soon. The next book here in the B tier is going to be The Four Loves. This is a book that I read a long time ago. It's been a while, but it's generally just a good book. I really don't have much to say about it. It talks about the 4 different words for love in Greek and how the Bible uses these types of things. And it's definitely interesting. I don't really have much to say about this one, to be honest, but it's good. If you like C.S. Lewis, you're going to like this book, basically. A tier books are all books that I really, really like. I would highly recommend them. First is going to be That Hideous Strength. That Hideous Strength is the best book out of the Space Trilogy. I accidentally read this book first, not knowing anything about the Space Trilogy, and as a standalone book, it was very, very good. I would definitely recommend it. I think that it's very prophetic in a lot of ways. But basically, the book follows these 2 characters who are extremely normal and boring people and how they kind of get dragged into this cosmic struggle. And this book is basically a narrative form of another book called The Abolition of Man, again, which we will be talking about soon. So if you like narrative forms of books that have a lot of allegory, this is going to be a book that you are really going to like. It's very witty. The characters are very good. For a fiction book, I would definitely say it's excellent. So, highly recommend it. Warning though, if you do read it, you are probably going to hate technology afterwards, but that's just a side effect of learning the truth about it. So, next in the A tier, we are going to have Till We Have Faces. Till We Have Faces is another excellent book, but I have to warn you that as you are going in to read this book, you are going to be asking, what the heck am I reading this for the first like 2/3 to 3/4 of the book. When I was recommended this book, they basically just told me, just read it all the way through, and then you'll get it. And that's what I did. I started reading it, and I just kind of blew through it, and I didn't know why I was reading it, but then you get to the very end, and you realize what the whole book is really about. So this is a book that I recommend. Don't lose heart while you're doing it. Just read it. It's a retelling of a mythology, and it takes a very interesting turn at the end. So definitely give it a go. Highly recommend this book. I recommend everyone reads this one, but it's something that you need to read yourself. This is why I have not done a summary on it, because it would ruin the whole book. Next on the list, I know I did the Space Trilogy on its own, but for the Narnia series, I'm going to put it all in one because there are so many of those books. And generally, they're all about the same in terms of how good they are. If you like fiction books, you are going to like the Chronicles of Narnia. They are very good. Now, I personally have not read all of the Chronicles of Narnia yet. But I did read the first half of them at this point. And honestly, I think that they're very good. They are definitely more for children than for adults. But as an adult, I still get a lot of enjoyment out of reading them. I would recommend reading them, especially if you have kids. Read them with your kids. They're very interesting. The reason why I say that they're for kids, though, is because a lot of the allegory is extremely simple to understand. There's really no reading between the lines. God is a lion, and I really don't have much to say about it. Literally, just like everything is spelled out for you as easily as possible. And that's good. If you're a kid, that's actually very helpful. It's not like Lord of the Rings where you really have to be reading between the lines in a lot of ways to understand. It's just very good. I particularly liked the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That's probably most people's favorites. I also really liked The Boy and His Horse, because it really takes a dunk on Islam. I personally am not a huge fan of Islam, so I really liked that book. You can definitely see what he has to say about it in that book. But again, highly recommend Chronicles of Narnia if you have children. So now we are on to the S tier books. And now the first one in the S tier that I'm going to be placing is The Abolition of Man. Just like The Hideous Strength, if you read this book, you are going to hate technology, and you are going to hate the Antichrist. And if you read this book, you are really going to see how the Antichrist seems to be making his way into this world and destroying mankind through technology and through modernity, modern ideas, modern philosophy. And this book is going to heavily push against it. But with this book, I would actually really recommend watching my summary on it because it is a little more challenging to understand. It's not super straightforward. His idea is very complicated in this book. So if you have trouble understanding it, feel free to watch my summary. Highly recommend it. Great book. My favorite of all of his books is The Abolition of Man, but he also has these other two books that I also very much enjoy. The first one is going to be the Screwtape Letters. I personally love the Screwtape Letters. I think that it's very accurate for how demons actually do tempt us and deceive people, and it really feels like you're reading a book written by a demon. That's the scariest part about it, that C.S. Lewis wrote this book. It's very compelling. The whole narrative, the way that it's told, how it's told from the demon's perspective. It's just a very interesting idea, very unique. Highly recommend it. You will learn a lot from reading this book. I personally read this book once every 2 or 3 years just because I enjoy it so much. So highly recommend. Feel free to pick it up and read it whenever you can. And finally, what is probably objectively C.S. Lewis's best book, which is going to be Mere Christianity. Mere Christianity is fantastic. I have to admit, though, my first time reading through Mere Christianity, I stopped about halfway through because I just felt like I had heard everything in this book before. And after some reflection on those thoughts and those feelings about this book, I realized that the reason why I felt that way is because everybody rips off of this book. If you are into apologetics in any way, chances are you've heard most of these arguments that he's going to make in this book, but that is actually a compliment to the book. Most people are stealing their arguments from C.S. Lewis. So if you want to find the source of these arguments, if you want to find the source of where people are getting this apologetic root from, it is from Mere Christianity. Mere Christianity is really just like his magnus opus. It's like the last one that he wrote that just kind of encapsulates everything. If this is the only book by C.S. Lewis that you read, you're going to understand all of his other books. All of the ideas that are found in all of his books accumulate into Mere Christianity. It's a fantastic book. I'm currently reading through it again with my wife right now, and I would recommend everyone read through it. It will give you the blueprints that you need to read all of his other books. So, if you want a book to start with, it's going to be Mere Christianity. All of the other books stand alone in a lot of ways, but Mere Christianity is definitely the one book that you need to read if you want to get into C.S. Lewis. So, with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed watching. Feel free to tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. I know that many people will probably disagree with me, but these are my recommendations. These are the order that I would recommend you read these books. Start with Mere Christianity and work your way down the list. So yeah, thanks for watching.